The guys are ready, so let's hand over to Rob Rose, JB, PB and Aldrin, and get on with the show.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Well, hi, gentlemen.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Welcome back. See, there's no need to be down. The fact that NFL football is over for another year and we are so many months away from even any meaningful pre-season action, let alone the regular season, which feels like a lifetime away, we still get to enjoy, to revel in the afterglow of what was a remarkable 2021-22. And we're going to do it in the grandest fashion. Despite the fact our podcast is over a year old, this is the point where we feel we not only have the confidence as individuals and as a collective, but the listenership to think it is worthwhile throwing ourselves into our very own end of season awards. Waving doesn't transfer.
I was waiting for you to throw in, some.
I'll add some sound
epic
effects.
Music.
Yeah, indeed. I'll add in some epic copyright-free music or potentially sound effects to add a certain amount of heft and gravitas to what is coming our way. So basically the idea is, rather than having to agree on which team goes into Club Dub, we have got to agree on who we believe are basically the movers and shakers, the people who make a difference in the NFL. So to run you down the awards that we have to decide today, we're going to start our conversation with our Club Dub podcast, Comeback Player of the Year. We're then going to play a game where we pick the king of defense. We're going to talk about the ultimate offensive weapon before we do the very catchily named Coachy McCoachface of the year. And then we'll do our own best in class, which is basically us trying to agree out of all of those and any other honorable mentions, who should be the NFL's player of the year, the NFL's true Mr. Universe. So 5 awards in total. We're looking for some kind of consensus or at least a vote that passes with some form of agreement. But if we're going to do comeback player first, we'll start with different people each time. But Aldrin, let's stick with tradition, right? For our first award, why don't you kick us off with the person you think is deserving of the comeback player nod?
Well, I mean, I think if we're not all in agreement on this, then I'll be amazed. But the player that is the comeback kid is Joe Burrow, is it not? From his really unfortunate rookie season injury to lead that team to a playoff appearance, I just think was sensational. And he was not only, I think, did he overcome a really tough injury, but he also managed to improve his game as well. I think Rob and I were in fairly round agreement that last year he was good in spots, but wasn't the kind of generational talent that maybe some had touted him as coming out of LSU. And yet he both came back from a really troubling injury and A, didn't look like he'd been affected by it, and B, took his game to another level. So, yeah, I just think for me, he's the runaway winner for comeback player of the year.
I like the suggestion. I mean, it's an injury when you look at like ACL, MCL and these types of injuries. As fans now, I think we have a certain expectancy that players come back from those. It's like, oh, they're going to miss months of time, but they're back. And I remember a time where it wasn't that clear cut. But you're absolutely right. To come back from that and find an entirely new level of performance. And I mean, to make a Super Bowl makes Joe Burrow an absolute contender for comeback player of the year. Now, you said you'll be amazed if we're not in agreement. I know this doesn't translate very well to the world of podcasting, but JB and PB, by nod or shake of the heads, as I can see you, do you have the same name? You do. Right. So my argument to say that I don't have...
There's only one other contender though, right? There's only one other contender.
Okay, so give me your one other contender and then I'll see just how far left field I am.
Okay, well, if you've gone like somebody random, then the only other contender is Dak Prescott. 100%
right.
Is the only other contender.
I think of as well.
From having that foot, ankle, leg injury to coming back and playing really well, he's the only other contender.
Okay. So
Go on.
we'll come back and talk Burrow, because clearly that's going to carry the sway here, and he's going to be anointed our first ever pod award winner. I had two other names, although one of them is quite tenuous. Cordarrelle Patterson just came back from being really average forever. You know, this is a guy
I'm not
who
sure
was
that
completely...
qualifies.
Well, I mean, I think so. I think he's had a real bounce back year. I think he's looked a real weapon and somebody you build an offense around in Atlanta when that did not look like his career trajectory at all. So he was one name I had. The other one, I appreciate he flashed brightly, but how about Eric Weddle, right? Literally sitting on his sofa for a couple of years, rolls in, picks up the pace of the league and winds up with a Super Bowl ring. I thought Weddle was absolutely immense, put his body on the line and did all sorts of things. So I had Cordarrelle Patterson and probably Eric Weddle as my main contender. But go on then, JB. Why did you go for what? Well, let's, maybe yours will be along exactly the same lines as Aldrin. So let's go. What stood out for you for Joe Burrow this year?
I mean, we'll get into that, but can we first draw attention to the fact that one of Dak Prescott's feet was pointing in the wrong direction to the rest of his body, and Rob didn't think that was a thing sufficient to come back from to be considered for the award.
Cordarrelle Patterson realizing he was an NFL player apparently is. So
I watched that injury live with you, and both of us made the same reaction as to when we saw Alex Smith get injured, and you just see his leg wobbling in the wind, and it's like, nah, Cordarrelle Patterson, what a season he had.
Honestly,
we might come back
to the untrained eye, JB. It may look like Cordarrelle Patterson didn't bounce back, but actually, I think you'll find he has.
He has.
I know.
Yeah. I know.
So I'm not taking any grief for Micah. And like I say, Eric Weddle, can we just focus on that, is a perfectly valid comeback player.
Yeah,
This is
totally
a guy
nailed it for like 3 games. Like, I mean, it's not.
But you say for 3.
I know.
That's
but the thing is,
NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. I mean, it's not a bad 3-game stretch.
It's not a bad 3-game stretch at all. But can we also draw attention to the fact that he injured himself in that Super Bowl, and yes, courageously carried on playing, but ultimately that was an example of the fact that he hadn't played for very long.
I think a lot of people get a lot of safeties
saying,
get
JB,
injuries.
he's next year's comeback player. When Eric Weddle returns from his Super Bowl injury, he'll then be someone you'd consider. Maybe he's just a year away. Who knows? Anyway, sorry, you've ribbed me sufficiently about. I still think Cordarrelle's a great shout, but talk us through what makes Joe Burrow the man for you then.
This is probably going to be quite a quick summary because Aldrin has kind of said it all. I will say I was probably the higher person on the totem pole for Joe Burrow last season. But like you said, like sort of both of you have said, we've seen so many players have those kinds of injuries and not be able to come back from them and be the player that they were at least immediately. And Joe Burrow came back better, which was really weird because it was for stretches. It was like he wasn't even injured at all. And I think the only time it really popped into anybody's mind was in the Super Bowl when he went down, and you're immediately thinking, oh, if that's the same knee, that's going to be really bad for it, for not the season, but potentially for next season and the effects from there. Because yeah, you can bounce back from one, but the more times that knee gets injured, the worse it's gonna potentially be. Like we're potentially going to see with OBJ. He did exactly the same thing. He's done that same ligament in again. So we'll have to see where he bounces back from. But yeah, I can't really add much more to what Aldrin said about Burrow.
I like OBJ as a shout. I mean, anyone who bounces back from oblivion in Cleveland is certainly worthy of notable mention. Maybe he's next year's, again, a bit like Weddle. Maybe he's just a year removed. PB, anything to add on what feels like the Joe Burrow train? It feels like pretty much a done deal here.
I think I agree completely with Aldrin that there were only 2 candidates for this award. Joe Burrow, whose leg was snapped in 2, and Dak Prescott, whose ankle was facing the wrong way. And I think, or his foot was facing the wrong way. And I think, nominating Patterson, who has just been indifferent through his career apart from returns, I wouldn't really class that as a comeback player. And I can't even remember Weddle. I mean, he did great, but I don't think comeback player of the year worthy to two guys that came back from career-threatening injuries potentially, but it's Burrow all day long. Number one, he took a team from near bottom of the league to the Super Bowl, coming back from a significant, major injury, major surgery. And as I can't remember if it was James or Aldrin that said, he improved as a player, was lights out this year, a lot of the time. So I don't think there's any discussion needed. It's Burrow for comeback player of the year, as shown in the NFL awards all day long.
Well, I'm so glad I've brought a little bit of entertainment and given you something to ridicule, but it feels like the first person heading into our season ending special VIP night in Club Dub is our comeback player of the year and AFC championship winning quarterback, Joe Burrow.
I'm also enjoying that Phil's rendering this episode of the podcast almost useless because he's like, no discussion needed. We'll just write a list and then move on.
I also like Joe Burrow. I think I might keep that. I quite like that. That's got a bit of a kind of Soleil feel about it. It feels like a name we can all get behind, right?
You don't want to workshop it a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe we should do this off air. Is that what you do with podcasting anyway? So 1 down, 4 to go. And JB, I'm coming over to you first this time because you get to talk about ultimately the man of steel, who is the ultimate wrecking ball on defense in the NFL in 21-22.
I love that we've gone to JB first for this because I think we all know who JB's selection is.
JB is obviously going to pick the man that equaled the single season sack record for a player in fewer games and would have broken it if it had been healthy for those. It is, of course, Trent Jordan, TJ Watt, because like Rob kind of put it there, like the man of steel, the wrecking ball. He was a guy that multiple offensive line coaches, multiple offensive coordinators and teams game planned for and still wrecked games and wrecked players and just putting up the stats that he put up. And in a shortened season, and we're talking 15 games I think he ended up starting in. 14 of those he played the full game because there was the one that he went out injured and then he missed the following 2 or 3 from there. And like we talked about, maybe we're going to talk about offensive players in a little bit who had phenomenal seasons and broke records, and we're expected to see that with the additional game. But I think TJ just was incredible. Just when the Steelers needed a stop on defense, when they needed a big splash play, you could guarantee he was involved. It wasn't always necessarily him doing it, but it was him freeing up some of the linemen to allow someone else to get in there. And you saw that with kind of how much of an assist he was for guys like Cam Hayward this season. So yes, TJ Watt is the king of defense. I will bend the knee to the king and I will fight any of you that disagree with me.
PB, please disagree with JB.
I feel now like I can't disagree with him because if we were to fight, I would win. So I'd feel a little bit bad for him. I don't know. TJ Watt was my pick, to be honest. I think it's, he finally broke Aaron Donald's stronghold on defensive player of the year. And I think it was definitely deserved. It was arguably deserved last year, definitely deserved this year. If you're thinking of other players, maybe that were contenders for this, I suppose Micah Parsons from the Cowboys was a good shout.
Parsons was on my list.
Yeah, defensive rookie of the year for sure. But, stepping straight into the lineup and really improving that defense and showing that you can do it, at the top NFL level as a rookie, I think there's no arguing about that. So I think your initial call, is TJ Watt. Aaron Donald's always in the conversation, but yeah, as a backup, I think, Micah Parsons is really pushing TJ Watt close there. But yeah, I agree with JB overall.
Go on then, Aldrin.
Yeah, Parsons was my other choice, really. And I think the reason Parsons stood out for me, maybe stood out more than TJ Watt in some elements, was purely because he came into the league like fresh out the gate. He picked up the pace of the game really quickly. And also the thing that made the difference for me is a lot of the season he was playing out of position. You know, they were playing him as a pure pass rusher rather than at linebacker. And so I think that's why he stood out. Just that, you know, the ability to step into a multitude of roles and ultimately lead a defense almost like a veteran would as a rookie. But yeah, I think just for the pure statistical dominance that TJ put in this season and probably last as well, I think he gets the nod from me.
So my only comment is, I think Aaron Donald, if he is a second or maybe a third in our list, certainly deserves an awful lot of credit, not only for winning a Super Bowl, but playing such a key role in winning a Super Bowl. I mean, ultimately his is the play that, you know, that ends the game and gives victory to his team in what was still, you know, the Bengals were driving field goal to tie, you know, touchdown to win in that game. So, I mean, it's a massive play. And I think it really does complete his resume. He has been Defensive Player of the Year in years without the favour towards quarterbacks, where I think he probably was the best player in the league, full stop. But yeah, in terms of the masses, then it looks like I'm not going to argue the TJ Watt thing. I think Aaron Donald has a little more talent around him as well these days. I mean, following hot on the heels of Cordarrelle Patterson, I mean, does Eli Apple deserve a mention? I mean, I've been following that guy's Twitter and he's pretty sure he's good. He's pretty sure he should be our Defensive Player of the Year. But JB, do you want to do the honours then and en masse and declare the second person into the VIP night at Club Dub as King of Defense?
Make way for the king. I don't know what else you want from me.
I don't know, maybe his name.
TJ Watt. I thought we...
Definitely my favourite.
Listening with JB.
Yeah. don't listen to this podcast while operating heavy machinery. Wonderful stuff. Right, so if we're 2 down and we've already done comeback player and defense, that means next we're talking offense. So the offensive weapon of 21-22, and PB, I'm over to you.
I mean, this is a bit trickier because we're kind of only thinking 2 names each, and I think there's probably a few more names in contention here. So I will. Go on,
rattle a few off. Go for it.
What, a few? So
yeah.
The eventual winner that we'll all agree on is Cooper Kupp. I think Jamar Chase. Oh, really? Well,
yeah,
well,
I've not gone Cooper Kupp, but
no,
okay, yeah,
Aldrin's obviously going to go Jonathan Taylor.
No, incorrect again. Don't worry, we'll get around to me, Phil. Don't you worry.
You've got Jamar Chase. I'd throw Tom Brady into the mix. Leading the QB stats as an offensive weapon. Yeah, I'd call him that. So that's 4 names, and we've not even got to Aldrin's one.
So you haven't mentioned mine yet. No, I was going to say you've not mentioned mine yet either. So really? I wonder if Aldrin and I are the same.
Cooper Kupp, Triple Crown winner, Super Bowl MVP as our offensive weapon of the year.
And I'll say this before me and Aldrin go to ours, right? I've picked up on the words offensive weapon because I think that absolutely sums this guy up. So Aldrin, you ready for this? On 3, we're going to do our name, right?
Oh, there we go. The Cordarrelle Patterson loving continues.
It's not Cordarrelle Patterson. Right. 1, 2, 3.
Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I've gone Deebo at the 49ers.
I mean, yeah, I get it. But
the guy is playing in the top 5 of 2 positions.
Yeah, that's what swayed it for me.
I get it, but okay.
So I had Cooper Kupp and Deebo as both of my guys, and
same.
I'm probably going to agree with Phil. So what? Go on, Phil. Why? Tell us about Cooper Kupp.
I mean, Cooper Kupp is the only correct answer. I know you.
Wow, you've convinced me.
I get Deebo Samuel is a bit of a swing. I mean, I love Deebo Samuel. Don't get me wrong. The way he plays the game is absolutely brilliant. I would absolutely love him on my team. But I mean, how does he block? I don't know. But you can't not give it to Cooper Kupp, who's just had an unbelievable season. You know, leads in catches, leads in yards, leads in touchdowns, Super Bowl MVP. I think he's the only person to have done that ever, aside from, is it Randy Moss or Jerry Rice? I can't remember which one it is.
Jerry Rice, I think,
in
had
a
done the
career.
Jerry Rice did it in a career. Cooper Kupp's done it in a season. Like, it's an all-time great season. I don't see how you could give it to anyone. Oh, all right, I get Samuel's top 5 in 2 positions, but you know, they never tried Kupp at running back, so you never know how he would have done. So for me, I just can't see you giving it to anyone else.
So I think just picking up on that, on just Phil's last comment there, if they never tried Cooper Kupp at running back. In the Super Bowl, there were multiple occasions, and there were even sort of a time that we were calling for it, where the Rams ran that jet sweep with Kupp to pick up a chunk of yardage when they needed a third down. I think a guy like McVay has got that in him to scheme up ways of using Kupp as a running back and getting the ball in his hands in that fashion. They just never really needed to, because the backs that they've got have been good, and Kupp has been absolutely tearing it up as a wide receiver. And Kupp was my first choice. He was the first name that I thought of, kind of for the fact that we have never maybe seen a season for a wide receiver like his. And yes, I see you listeners, I see you people in the comment section on YouTube pointing out that he had an extra game to do it in, and those are valid, and we love you for those. But everyone else had an extra game in the season to do it as well, and still no one matched what he was doing. So like he built that relationship with Matthew Stafford really quickly. Stafford came to rely on him a little bit like we saw with Stafford and Megatron in Detroit. You know, there were a lot of games that were maybe not won by the Lions, but close for the Lions, because Stafford knew he could throw it and Megatron would catch it. Now, Cooper Kupp is not the stature of Calvin Johnson, but there was still that trust that Stafford could throw the ball there and Kupp would be on the end of it to bail the Rams out when they needed it. I think the consideration for Samuel has to be the fact that there were massive chunks of games where the 49ers just had absolutely nothing but him. And with all of that pressure, he still managed to like power through tackles on multiple occasions and pick up yardage and everything like that. It was a really impressive showing. Again, the likes of which we haven't really seen before. But I don't think you can ignore, like you said, the triple crown of receiving and the Super Bowl MVP and the amount of big clutch plays, especially in the playoffs, that he pulled out. Kind of, for me, it has to be Kupp as well.
I kind of see the point. I think we're talking about two players who have done something that no player in the league has ever done before. They just happen to do it in the same season. But Kupp's feels historic, doesn't it? Kupp's feels like, you know, in 20 years' time, will we be saying there was never another player who played wide receiver and running back like Deebo Samuel? Possibly. But I can absolutely see that there's not another player who does the Triple Crown, wins the Super Bowl and then the MVP. And also a bit like Donald, you know, makes those big plays. And the thing I love about Cooper Kupp, and Deebo Samuel and, you know, a couple of other players in the league have this. The thing about Cooper Kupp is, what do you do? Because he's fast enough to beat one cornerback. And if you line him up against two, well, he's fast enough to beat them anyway. You know, there really is no way to cover Kupp reliably. Are we at a 2-2 tie? Is that where we've landed?
Well,
are we 2 for Kupp, 2 for Samuel?
I'm not having this. Cordarrelle Patterson had more rushing yards than Deebo Samuel.
Well, see, now you're preaching to the
player of the
converted.
year, Phil.
He's the comeback player of the year, Phil.
I tell you what, Cordarrelle
Stupid
Patterson
argument.
was brilliant at rushing. He was brilliant at receiving. He was great at kick returns. And at the London game, he was throwing the ball up into the crowd, you know, into the top tier. So I've never seen another, you know, offensive weapon do that. So let's crown it to him. It's Cooper Kupp. What are you talking about?
I would say that if I go back to my list that I have, then I had Kupp number 1 and I changed it to Deebo. So I'm happy to cede the ground on Cooper Kupp because, like you said, I do think that the season does feel historic. The fact that he did everything and it then culminated in a Super Bowl win. And I guess the thing that probably just edges it for me is, I know, Rob, you mentioned, or JB, was it, that the 49ers had just Debo, and yet Debo still produced. I think that third and fourth quarter for the Rams, they had nothing beyond Cooper Kupp. They had no run game. They had Van Jefferson missing passes. They had no tight end, no OBJ. You knew the ball was going to Kupp, and yet he plucks out absolute clutch plays in critical moments. I think that 4th and 1 jet sweep, and then that charge down the field for that final touchdown.
Yeah.
And then when he has the ball in his hands in the end zone, gets that helmet to helmet, gets up and then catches a touchdown on the next play. I think it's stuff like that in years in the future, we'll look back and just think, yeah, that was a really impressive way to end the season.
I feel like if we were to put Samuel as our offensive player of the year and not Kupp, we can change the categorization of our podcast from sports to comedy. End of discussion.
This is the guy who nearly lost 120 quid on the length of a national anthem. I mean, this is how seriously, but didn't. So, Phil, as you're throwing a bit of a mini tanty, do you want me to hand over to you? Do you want to put our third VIP into the most special night in Club Dub? It's all
also,
yours.
Phil, just so you're aware, what we're looking for here is you to announce it and then give the name.
Yeah, include him in the announcement would be ideal. Yeah, just clear up any ambiguity.
Offensive weapon of the year, Cooper Kupp.
What I like there is we were having a really nice friendly discussion for 2 awards, and then we got to that one and just decided to have an argument about it.
Well, we didn't decide to. It felt like there was an aggressor, Phil, in our midst. I don't know how. Maybe that's a nickname.
To keep some credibility with our NFL podcast, not you absolute jokers.
Yeah, we'll see what Debo Samuel thinks of your viewpoint. I don't think Cooper Kupp's going to be available for comment, is he? But yeah, nice that Cordarrelle got his second mention. He's kind of the unsung hero of our pod, clearly. Right, so it means we're on to award 4 of 5, right? We're rolling through these. Uh-huh. And we've got the Coachy McCoachface Coach of the Year. So, again, I think there is probably 2 pretty strong contenders that jump out, but rather than start with them, I'm going to give some honourable mentions and let you guys take, I think, probably the likely heavy hitters. For me, I think what Mike Vrabel did in Tennessee with a Titans team built around the run and a special running back for half a season was a great coaching display. You know, a coach absolutely preparing a team to play in a way that saw them week in, week out perform above the talent level that they were able to put out on the field. I love
Rob. I love that you've said, I'm going to go with a wild card, and you've picked our consensus number 1 pick. But yeah,
really?
Go for it.
Have you got
who else
Awards Coach of the Year?
I thought you were all going to go Zach Taylor at the Bengals. I mean, that's pretty spectacular.
I think that was the second choice that we went for.
Oh, okay.
It's Vrabel, but if not Vrabel, it's Taylor. So
I was thinking when you were going to go. I thought when you say I'm going to pick a random one, you'd be like Matt Nagy or something like.
Yeah,
but no, you picked the one that we all thought.
Okay, well that's fine then. I'll keep going. So Mike Vrabel, I think in terms of coaching and scheming.
Sorry. Are we just going to let Aldrin's pronunciation of Matt Nagy just go past
I thought
there?
You might let it lie, but no, don't.
No, absolutely not.
Wow, did he put
Matt Nagy?
I said Nagy rather than Nagy.
Well,
but yeah, it's bad when JB picks you up on people's names.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I wonder what Robert would have to say about it. That's all I can. Anyway, Mike Vrabel absolutely coached up a team. And look, I mean, they went in as number 1 seeds on the AFC side, an AFC that feels stacked. I mean, I know we're looking at an NFC team who've just won the Super Bowl, but you look at teams like the Bills, the Chiefs, great year from the Raiders. Obviously, we've got the Bengals in there, and Chargers had their highlights. I mean, so many teams showed such a high ceiling. I think that just makes what Vrabel was able to achieve just all the greater, really. So for me, Mike Vrabel would be a standout. I think my honourable mentions beyond Zach Taylor that I think we can probably discuss as a group. I mean, probably Sean McVay. I mean, it's very difficult to argue with a guy who does what he does. I mean, he has worked with Les Snead in a phenomenal way, rewritten the rules on how teams are built and how franchises are managed. And he now has the vindication of a Super Bowl. You know, I think without the win at the end of this year, there would still be questions. But I very much like that. So Vrabel, Zach Taylor, Sean McVay. Before we come back and talk a bit about Taylor, I think he's worthy of a mention. Are there any other names floating around I haven't included yet?
I do have one, and it's only as an honourable mention, not for Coach of the Year. But yeah, if we want JB to pick me up on pronunciation, it's going to be Bisaccia from the Raiders.
The Raiders, yeah.
And only because I think the way that he steadied the ship from utter ruin and chaos in that organisation to just get them back to playing football, doing things well, getting into the playoffs, I thought that was a really strong performance to pick up in a situation that was really chaotic. So certainly not Coach of the Year or anything like that kind of standard, but I do think he did a stellar job just levelling things out and getting them just back to playing football.
I think, I know we're focusing on head coach when we're talking coach. I thought there were a number of coordinators who did great things. Lovie Smith, I thought, absolutely got a unit to perform well above expectations. You know, there's a few coordinators out there who I think were worthy of their head coach nods, but we'll save that for next week's pod. So is Vrabel a unanimous choice then? Before, like I say, Zach Taylor, I had him on the hot seat, thought he was going to be the first coach out of a job. He took an unbalanced and I don't know, you can't really say now that they were devoid of talent. I mean, the way they developed through the year, you know, at tight end, great season from Mixon, Burrow, Chase and so on. But I mean, I think he transformed a franchise and an attitude of a franchise in front of our very eyes. I think to imagine that he's not winning Coach of the Year off the back of that says just huge amounts about Mike Vrabel for me. But is it entirely unanimous? Are we all four in the corner of Mike? Oh, go on, Phil. Go on. You look like a man
easily be swayed to Taylor.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. But
take Taylor purely because if you look at the division that Vrabel was in, you know, the Jags and the Texans are four.
Oh, it's impossibly tough division, Phil. I don't know how he got out.
You know, the Colts were you know, pretty much gave up nothing this year as well. So for me, I'm more impressed by Taylor, considering that we didn't give the Bengals any real credit at the start of the season. You look at the Ravens, the Steelers and the Browns, and you could have argued any of them was going to be playoff teams. So I think they've come through a tough division. They've played 3 games on the road in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl. For me, I'd probably go with Taylor. I mean, you know, in my head, I kicked it on Urban Meyer a little bit, but yeah, you know, totally counted him out. But yeah, Taylor, I reckon.
It is a tough argument. I mean, Vrabel, I think, did an amazing job to get that team to be the number 1 seed. I think whatever division you're in with the situation they had, I do think that's phenomenal. I mean, obviously they were without Henry, but also wide receivers through the year. I mean, there were times where it was down to game planning and coaching. But I do hear you. I mean, I went Vrabel because I thought you would all go Taylor. I mean, I thought he probably was the strongest shout. So Phil, you're Taylor. JB, where do you sit on this? We're down to 2.
I had Vrabel as my first choice. I think he did do an incredible and has done an incredible job with multiple Tennessee Titans teams that have lacked in certain areas but have still come in to perform. But I think Phil's kind of right. Like I wouldn't object to anybody making the claim that Taylor was the choice either, because like at the beginning of the season when we were kind of looking at like who's a jobber, who's out of his depth, who's absolutely going to get the sack at the end of the season, and Taylor was right in that conversation after a pretty lackluster 2 years. So after this season, which like the Bengals, Taylor, Burrow, maybe to a degree Chase, you could all make the argument that their season performances came out of absolutely nowhere in terms of expectation. So I'm going Vrabel, but again, I wouldn't argue with Taylor.
Right. I think Phil's point about that division for the Bengals is fair, but then the Tennessee Titans are touching. Anyway, Aldrin, who are you going for? So we're at the moment, we're one for Taylor, one for Vrabel, an honourable mention for all that went on in Las Vegas. Where are you taking us?
I think I probably would end up plumping for Taylor.
Right then.
I do agree. Phil makes a valid point. They had some tougher opponents, but also I just think...
I often do.
Yeah, it's rare. I just think like the gutsy nature of some of those calls as well, that even in the Super Bowl, he didn't go away from his philosophy of wanting to go for it and wanting to win it all. You know, I'm thinking those, even in that first quarter, one of those early possessions, 4th and 2 or 3. And he's like, yeah, we're going to go for it because we want to win. Yeah. So I think just gutsy calls like that. But I mean, I love Mike Vrabel as a throwback, but I think Taylor was great.
So it comes to me to name the Coachy McCoachface Coach of the Season on the Club Dub Football Podcast. And I'm going to say that we're pulling back the velvet rope and letting in Cincinnati Bengals head coach Zach Taylor. Very good honourable mention for what went on in Las Vegas, and I'm going to absolutely chop this pronunciation up as well. But I think actually even Derek Carr, you know, that whole, I think what those players did in the circumstance actually just oozed class at a point where that could have just all fallen down around their ears. So that means we are left with only the biggest, the one man who goes in as our effectively player of the year, our statue to all things NFL. Now, it can be a player we have already mentioned. It can be, Cordarrelle Patterson, my money's on. It could be somebody who has not yet come up in the conversation. But you know what? We've gone all around. Aldrin, do you want to kick us off with the person you would like to declare as your true NFL player of the year?
Yeah, just because I like winding Phil up. So I'm not going to pick Tom Brady. The player that I'm going to pick is Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers. make the argument.
Make
the argument for A-Rod.
Just wanted to see Phil's face as much as anything.
This podcast is a joke. A joke, I tell you.
We'll change you to a comedy podcast. I don't know why he's brummy now, but there you go. I just think the thing with Aaron Rodgers is he makes perfection look flawless and easy. And I know Phil's doing his stupid little face, but I just think the guy is so consistent year on year that we've almost become a bit numb to it. You know, it feels like he didn't have a ridiculously stellar season, and Phil will point to all of Tom Brady's stats and yada, yada, yada. And that's fair. I think Tom Brady had a very good year. But I just think the way in which, you know, Aaron Rodgers, say what you like about him, he came into the season creating controversy and maybe a bit of discord in that Green Bay Packers locker room, and here's the players that I want, and this, that, and the other, and all of that stuff that went on. So as a person, maybe not 100%, but I think just the way he's played all year, you know, he gets the best out of, apart from Devontae Adams, average receivers. You know, I mean, his best other talent is Valdez Scantling or, you know, a number of other middling to average NFL wide receivers. And I just think, you know, his stats are incredible. The way he protects the ball is incredible. I just think he's an absolute phenomenon in the league. And the fact that there's rumors of him maybe walking away, I mean, I don't see it, but would certainly, whenever that day happens, is going to make the league a less exciting offensive display. So yeah, for me, I just think he's had another stellar year, and it almost goes under the radar because it's expected that he's brilliant.
He is automatic, isn't he? It is just that. I mean, I absolutely get you. It doesn't feel like his best year, and it's still an MVP year. Still no more Lombardis in Green Bay, which will be I think the thing they will rue when he finally does move on, particularly if is it Jordan Love, who's probably the
Yeah.
heir apparent there. So yeah, I think he will be
dominating in the
missed.
division with the Bears, the Vikings, and the Lions.
Just you wait till next year, Phil. You're going to get your comeuppance.
Yeah, just you wait. Yeah, the
Just
the
wait till we're
Buccaneers
comparing the
scrape
Tampa Bay
into
Buccaneers
500.
to the Jags when you wheel out Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. Don't worry,
There's no
Phil. We've got it
argument.
all next year.
There's no argument that, Aaron Rodgers is a top 5 quarterback in the league. He's an absolute superstar. He's a great player.
He doesn't block though, does he? In fairness,
He's
there's
not
no
player-
Chris Godwin.
Not player of the year.
Go on then, Phil. Well, you can go next then. Who is the person you are pulling out to be our statue for the league?
I'd go back to, we've picked him as offensive weapon. I'd go back to Cooper Kupp for his season personally. But if I'm not picking Kupp, then I'm absolutely picking Brady. He's topped Rodgers in every stat, I think. Apart from maybe he's thrown a couple more interceptions when he's tried to lob it deep. But, a guy doing that at 44 years of age, absolutely unbelievable. It's a shame that he wasn't crowned NFL Player of the Year. But for me, if I'm not going Kupp, then I would absolutely go Brady.
Right,
Mr.
Kupp then
Consistent,
Brady.
20 years.
I was reading
Who are you
it's a
going
really
for, Phil?
nice
Who's
article.
on the fence? You've got to pick one. You can't mention both. Pick one.
Brady.
Right. There's a really lovely article actually about the Rams Super Bowl wins, kind of bookending Tom Brady's career, which I thought was really nice, that I read on NFL.com in the last week. I thought it was one of the best articles I've read in a while. So Tom Brady gets your nod. JB, are we going to hear more clamouring for TJ Watt to win?
Big Ben. Big Ben's the winner.
Big, large Benjamin is the winner of NFL Player of the Year.
I'm glad Phil went before me because it gave me a little bit. I hoped it would have given me a bit more time to make a decision, but unfortunately, I'm still sat here kind of unsure who to pick. Like Aldrin's made good arguments for Aaron Rodgers, and it's nice to see him given a shot at this. It's the only shot he might take sometimes, but there have been too many amazing in-game performances. There have been too many season-long performances really for me to kind of sit here and say this is my player of the year. Like you can make arguments for TJ Watt, you can make arguments for Aaron Donald, you can make arguments for Debo or Cooper Kupp or Derrick Henry. If we look at how the Titans performed with him versus how the Titans performed without him, you can make arguments for Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert or Lamar Jackson. Again, using the same Derrick Henry thing. Look how good the Ravens were with him versus how good the Ravens were without him. If I was on any other podcast, I would try and make an argument for basically abstaining from this vote because I can't pick anybody.
Well, the worst at sitting on a fence, JB. The absolute worst. Hop off that fence. Pick a side.
I've picked people in every other thing. It's very hard to pick a lane here.
Who did you write on your list before we all started talking? Did you add a list?
I did. I have a list, and my player of the year was ? To be decided later. You know what,
Carl, you got to pick someone.
All right, let us go with the. I was about to say the triple crown winner, but is he the quadruple crown winner now?
I think he's made his own. His own category now.
Let's go for the champ. If we add the Super Bowl ring into it as well, let's go Cooper Kupp.
Right. So we got 3 different names, which kind of surprisingly gives me the casting vote. But I will say this. I'm about to pick one of the players mentioned, and this guy, there you go.
Daryl Patterson, yeah.
This guy breaks it down a bit. I've already picked my gender. This guy is truly a great, absolutely automatic, utterly reliable, amazing competitor. To think he had his statistically best year in his 22nd NFL season. How on earth can you look beyond Tom Brady? The only thing that would have added to his folklore would have been if that comeback would have been completed in the playoffs. What a comeback it was as well. I mean, just the most remarkable career. And I mean, we did in our Super Bowl show, didn't we? We did, our Super Bowl quiz, and it was, what's the most popular first name for quarterbacks in the Super Bowl? And it's Tom, and he was the only one. It's a career that will never be matched. I mean, you look at players like Patrick Mahomes, who I think was actually worthy of mention. I think he had a very good season. Second half, I thought he was on fire this year. After a really poor start, they absolutely found those gears. But you know what? He's already behind Brady. He's already not on pace with Brady. And the problem is nobody ever will be again. The things that will be done and the ways that he will be recognized within our sport after he's gone are going to, and I mean gone from the sport, crikey, I'm not kind of foreseeing the end for dear Tom.
He is old.
He is very old, but I mean, that lifestyle, no bread and entirely vegan, I mean, he could live forever. But the thing about Tom Brady is if, and I still think it is an if, this is his last NFL season, the standards he set in what was his swan song are as good as anybody. I'm with you, Phil. The MVP debate, I think, it's always a quarterback, isn't it? Bar those very rare occurrences. And I think it was one of three with Rodgers, with Brady, and I think maybe Mahomes could have had a look in if he'd have started better. But yeah, I think the last person into Club Dub as part of our awards night VIP celebration has to be the greatest VIP the league has ever seen. The absolute standard for professional football in the history of the game. I am going to put TB12, Tom Brady, into Club Dub as our NFL Player of the Year. Oh, that felt dramatic. It felt, I mean, it was a lot like the Oscars without all that esteem. I just quoted Ricky Gervais there to see if Phil noticed. He didn't. Pretends to be a huge fan of him, doesn't he? Anyway, so I think we've put 5 different but very worthy winners into our Club Dub celebration. An amazing season, and without sounding too cheesy, I think the winner in this year were the fans, weren't they? The playoffs in particular, I think, were probably never to be matched in my kind of following of the NFL. I've never seen playoffs like it. To think we've not really mentioned Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, to think we've not mentioned, really the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and other teams that got so deep in the playoffs that could have had their own kind of fairy tale end and brilliant season, I think only speaks to the quality that was around elsewhere. Gentlemen, I cannot wait to do this again in a year's time.
Can we do some alternate awards next week?
Well, what do you want? I mean, I don't want to upset people, Phil. I don't think we're we're kind of a middling podcast. I mean, I'm already standing up for Corderell and Weddle over here. So, yes, alternative awards we can do. We've got an off-season to
best blocking wide receiver.
I was thinking best end zone star jumps. Stuff
it feels
that.
Feels light on content, this. But who knows? With a week to workshop, who knows what we can come up with. But alternative awards, I like. Maybe even we just do our favourite player and the reason why. Then maybe Corderell throwing balls into the crowd at, was it Tottenham Hotspur Stadium? Where were we?
It was.
Makes the list that time. But gents, I loved the argument. I loved the passion displayed. And let's get back together in a week and do more of the same, if that all works for you.
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, have a great week. Have a great week, all of you in Listenerland. We'll catch you again in 7 days.
Cheers, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks a lot.
This is amazing.
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.